From the TV30 studio, here's Jim Schneider.
Well, good evening and welcome to the inFocus broadcast here on Channel 30 as we come together to keep you informed on critical issues. And once a month we have a legislative update. And that's what we're going to be doing on this first Monday of December as well. Provide an update on some of the matters that are going on in medicine, those things that impact you, your faith, your family, your freedoms here in our state. Did you know that our congressional maps are under attack? We thought they were safe, but they're under attack once again. Did you know that legislation has been introduced to give inerrant rights to land and public parks and so forth? We'll be talking about some of those aspects and the right of nature there to, and for these places to exist, to flourish, to regenerate, and also to be restored. We also will be talking tonight about the attempt there is to prohibit a virtual school from participating in the school choice program in the state, of which there are many, many families that do just that. So all that and more on tonight's inFocus program. It's our privilege to have back with us tonight Daniel Degner, who is president of Wisconsin Family Council, and Sam Krebs, legislative director with Wisconsin Family Action. Gentlemen, good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jim.
Hope you had a good Thanksgiving.
That was a great Thanksgiving. How about yours?
Ours was too. Having some time with family was a blessing, and certainly, Sam, giving God thanks, something that we often do not do in our society today.
That's correct, Jim, and it's a lot to be thankful for. We still have a great state that we live in. I love Wisconsin, even though we have lots of challenges we talk about. Sure. It's a great state to live in.
Indeed it is. Well, we're going to get right into it. We've got a lot on our plate here again tonight, as we always do on the legislative update, and we kind of monitor what's going on in the governor's office as well. And sure enough, another month, another proclamation on the LGBTQ spectrum, and this here is his Transgender Day of Remembrance that he gave for November 20th, 2025, whereas today the state of Wisconsin reaffirms the right of every Wisconsinite to stand boldly in their truth without fear of persecution, judgment, discrimination, or violence, and joins members of the state's LGBTQ community and allies in condemning violence against transgender and gender nonconforming individuals, remembering all those whose lives have been senselessly lost to anti-transgender violence. Well, he had a Transgender Day of Remembrance. Your comments?
Yeah, to me, the first thing that stands out is just interesting is Governor Evers isn't promoting truth as we would say biological truth, that people are male or they're female, but it's this idea of their truth. And again, we see this whole idea of our society is continuing to struggle, it's continuing to crumble because we just completely deny God's existence. We deny science, and we just say, oh, just make whatever your truth is. And we see this again in the governor's proclamation as I think we mentioned almost every time that we're here. Again, Governor Evers continually is putting forth this transgender ideology, this transgender agenda. And I think now we're at almost over 1/3 of the different days that we have each year is now promoting the LGBT ideology.
Yeah, it started with a Pride weekend or a Pride Day, and then a Pride week and a Pride month, and on it goes. Sam, Daniel pointed that out. He talks about their truth. That's kind of an interesting statement he used.
Yeah, and Jim, it's really sad to see because they talk about the violence. I mean, we condemn all sorts of violence, right. But you'll notice that frequently the violence to condemnation only goes one way. And so with this, they're definitely pushing an agenda. They're pushing a truth of their sorts, but it's not the truth. And the moral fabric of our country and our state declines because there is no recognition of what the truth is. And that's because we don't have a return to the truth of God's word.
Right. Well, friends, just a reminder that there is an election for governor coming up just less than a year from now, next November. A primary will precede that, and we will be talking more about elections as well as time goes on. But let's talk about an issue pertaining to those elections, and that deals with the matter of our voting boundaries. We saw in the state of Wisconsin a remapping of our legislative districts, both the state assembly and the state senate, and the issue came up before the court at that time, the Supreme Court, about also redistricting the congressional lines. No, we're not going to do that. Everything's safe, everything's secure. It seemed to be the message we got. But lo and behold, now we see that the whole matter of the congressional boundaries is the Wisconsin Supreme Court has now turned this over to a couple of committees.
Right, Jim. So kind of to break down for folks back home is the the state Supreme Court has heard in the past a couple of different challenges to congressional maps. So that's U.S. House of Representatives. And there was challenge a few months ago, back in the summer, and those were dismissed. Were challenged in the 2022 maps that were drawn and accepted by Governor Evers. So what's happened now is the same group has brought back another challenge to the 2011 maps that were no longer even under, but are the basis for the 2022 maps. And what the state Supreme Court did is they created these 3-judge panels that will evaluate the maps under some different criteria, which is unique in of itself. Something to note of that, those 3-judge panels is all 6 of them are liberal judge appointees. They're all appointees of Governor Evers. They are all but one endorsed Susan Crawford the most recent election, and the one that didn't endorse Susan Crawford did endorse Janet Prolasewicz, Joanne Klappenberg, among a handful of other liberal justices. So they kind of stacked the deck. They could have chosen to randomly, select out of the 261 circuit court judges to, do this fairly and randomly, like whoever comes up with those 6 positions. But no, they handpicked people that they knew were going to rule in their direction.
Yeah, so I mean, we say that the jury is out, but it seems that the jury is rigged in this regard. And here's an article that came from the MacIver Institute, and it says conservative Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Annette Ziegler said the progressive majority on the court handpicked Democratic judges is a furtherance of delivering partisan political advantage to the Democratic Party. She called the picks purely political. Handpicking circuit court judges to perform political maneuvering is unimaginable, she wrote in her opinion. Out of the 261 circuit judges, the far-left Supreme Court has chosen 6 other far-left judges to oppose redistricting, including a former Democratic county chair and 3 Evers appointments the party posted. I mean, this is really outrageous to see how there's no thought of just blind justice in all of this. There's not putting on blindfolds on the justices here, but it is very blatant as to what their agenda seems to be, Daniel.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And part of the background, too, that even brought us here, it goes back to things we've talked about on this show before. And I go back to the religious freedom case we had at the Catholic Charities in Superior. What we saw there was a 9-0 smackdown of the U.S. Supreme Court telling this liberal Supreme Court what they were doing was wrong. And so there's a lot of talk behind the scenes that part of what's happening here in this case is they know that if the Wisconsin State Supreme Court takes this case and they rule to overturn these maps, it's likely going to result in another unfortunate, really shameful loss at the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's one of the reasons they're doing this. And what really should stand out to people is these are Democrat maps. One of the things I hear oftentimes is, well, these are gerrymandered Republican maps. But these maps were drawn by Governor Tony Evers himself, and they were voted when the Supreme Court was a 4-majority conservative, 3 minority liberal. All 3 members of the minority liberals voted for Governor Evers' maps, and the one swing vote, Justice Brian Hagedorn, also voted for these maps. And so again, we see this interesting cognizance of, well, if conservatives are in the majority, these maps are good, but now liberals have the majority. We need to rewrite these maps to somehow create a fair and balanced congressional map.
Jim, this is really, from my perspective, a naked political power grab, to kind of what Daniel described. Because if you think back to, the Supreme Court election wasn't that long ago. It feels like ages ago to me. Right. But you think about the race between Brad Schimel and Susan Crawford. Susan Crawford was on a phone call with fundraisers on this exact issue, where they said, "We're electing you to overturn the congressional maps. That is why we want you. That's what you're going to do when you get elected." And so you see, when they say who they are, believe them. And that's what they're expected to do.
What timetable do we have with this?
I'm not sure on the timetable yet, Jim. We'll kind of pay attention to what the 3-judge panel will carry out at this point.
Okay, because there is a deadline that's coming forth for candidates who have to declare their candidacy. Probably, is that sometime late spring, early summer? Or
filing papers starts early in spring. So congressional candidates they're already gearing up for campaigns at this point.
Right.
They're already looking at how they're going to win their races, or run their races. And if those lines are shifting and changing, it hurts both the candidates, but it hurts the voters.
Right.
Because you don't know. We had this just recently with the state legislature being figured around. I was just in a legislative office, and they're still helping people from their old district because the person was extremely confused. Like, "Oh, I thought it was here. I thought you were here, my representative." And I thought, you can help me, right? And they're like, "Yes, we'll help you, but technically, somebody else is your representative now because the lines got all changed. So it really throws constituents into a bind when they're trying to get help on, whether that's we're dealing with the state government or federal government.
Yeah, and indeed, it was after the census that the majority party was able to draw the maps. They did that, but now with the turnaround of political power, it is a power grab like we've not seen before here in the state to nullify these districts, and that happens both the state assembly, the state senate, and now our congressional maps as well. You're watching inFocus here on TV 30, and here's another headline that had been in the news. This is the bill to legalize online sports betting stalls. Now, this is from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. You fellas have been on this program before. We were talking about the efforts that were going on to legalize sports betting. It seemed like it was gaining some momentum, and now the brakes are on. What's going on?
Yeah, well, I would say a lot of what I would credit to the reason the brakes are on is Sam's work in the Capitol. We were really uncertain what was going to happen. We were told they were likely going to go in the state assembly, vote on it in the floor right before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And I encouraged our team in a staff meeting to pray that God would change the hearts and minds of those in the state assembly, that they would change their votes to a no vote. And praise be to God that through Sam's efforts, as well as many of your listeners calling their legislator, emailing your legislator, telling them their thoughts on this issue, that there was enough votes to kill this bill for now. But right now, we don't know if this could come back in 2026, but at least for now, this bill is not going to pass this year.
Okay, so the bill itself is still available for them to pick it up if they choose?
That's correct. So no bill is actually really dead, and when there's this much money involved, it certainly there'll be a push back in January and February for this to try to get passed again. So we'll be monitoring that along with some other folks as well.
So who's pushing the legislation?
The legislation is actually a bipartisan push. Both Republicans and Democrats see an opportunity. I think they're have different motivations. Mm-hmm. I think the Democrat side of it, they're very close with many of the tribes, and the structure of the bill would give almost a complete monopoly to the tribes on online sports betting. So they find this as a way to empower their allies and give them more opportunities to take more money. Republicans most likely see this as an opportunity to cash in on the revenue that's being passed through on sports gaming. We know that there are billions of dollars that are spent and bet and lost on online sports betting. And so I think there's some legislators who see if we put a tax on that, or we find a way to funnel some of that into state revenues, it's a way to answer some of our revenue problems. Mm-hmm. Our perspective is a little bit different. We think that you shouldn't be trying to find revenue solutions based on the backs of often what is poor decisions, losses, and heartbreak, honestly, at the end of the day. We've seen many studies that see that there's a financial and a social cost related to online sports gambling. Studies have shown that for every $1 that a person spends on gambling, on online sports gambling, they spend $2 less in savings and investments. And so this has a really distinct financial cost. There's a really big social cost. We've seen the breakdown of the family, higher bankruptcy rates, and other problems that come along with having online sports gambling legalized.
Especially when you bring it on your mobile devices, and you've got a phone sitting right there, you're watching the game and watching plays, and okay, I'm going to bet on this play, I'm going to, so many yards, the score, every aspect of the game, and you can see as one loses time and time again, the potential for domestic abuse is really heightened.
Yeah, well, and absolutely. And going back to what you mentioned too, this idea of now people are betting on literally every single play that can happen. And we've seen this now. There's been scandals in Major League Baseball. We've seen scandals in the NBA just within the last month or so. After this bill is introduced, of scandal after scandal of these different athletes that are throwing games, throwing opportunities in order to help some of these bettors win. And so we see it's a bad cycle that way, but also when it comes to the families that are impacted as well.
Let's hit another issue here tonight, public policy issues and legislation that's going on. The last budget passed earlier this year. We saw the governor change some characters in the bill to actually bring about a per student funding increase of $325 every year until the year of 24-25. That's for the next 400 years. Here's a headline from the Center Square. Wisconsin Republicans push to reverse 400 years school funding veto. What's happening with this, Sam?
Yeah, so this recently just popped up from the Legislative State Senate, I believe, passed it. And so what is happening is they're trying to undo a veto from not this past budget, the budget before that, where Governor Evers essentially enabled school districts to raise property taxes by $325 per student. So you multiply that by how many students are in the school district, and then that allows them to raise their property tax levy. So what's really going on here is I think the legislators are presenting to the people, hey, do we really think this is a good idea? Do we think this is actually going to be beneficial long-term for the financial health of many in this state? Because essentially this will be hitting people's property tax bills coming January 2026. And so that's the first time people will be seeing these property tax increases hit their bills. And so we'll see, will that make a difference in people's opinions? Will it take some time before that compounding effect, because that's the 400-year factor of that. It compounds, I think, in the trillions of dollars in terms of increased property taxes. So will that happen right away, or will there be a gradual shift in pressure on people after that happens?
Right, right. No governor has ever raised taxes to this magnitude in the history of our state or the history of the country. I don't believe we've ever seen that.
Well, 400 years is pretty unprecedented, seeing as we've only been a state for over 100 years. So it seems like a forever tax in a way.
Right, it really is. We also have this headline that came out: National Group files complaint over UW-Madison gender bathroom policy. Evidently, males who want to access female restrooms have been able to do that. There's complaints that are going on this, but this issue is not going away, this at UW-Madison.
No, and again, this is where I say, especially these gubernatorial elections, they matter. A lot of these elections matter. We need to have someone in the governor's mansion in 2020 that gets elected in 2026 to enter in 2027 that's going to say, no, UW, we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to make sure that you're following federal guidelines as it follows Title IX policy, but also, most importantly, protecting these women from these dangerous situations.
So we know a group has filed a Title IX civil rights complaint against UW-Madison, and under the Trump administration, they've had different directives here too, Sam.
Yeah, and we've seen this play out over even the last decade between higher education and school districts. The group that filed the lawsuit, Parents Defending Education, also filed a similar lawsuit in Ohio. They've partially won that case so far. It's still ongoing, but they had good signs on that trending right now. But we've seen in our own backyard in Wisconsin, we've seen in Mukwonago and Elkhorn, I believe in Kenosha, some local K-12 school districts who had lawsuits filed over their bathroom policies, actually going in the right direction, saying that a transgender individual could not go into a women's bathroom. And so they were sued, and some of those school districts lost those cases. Some are ongoing yet right now. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is actually currently litigating a case in Mukwonago on behalf of parents and parents' rights. And so what we're seeing is these cases coming from both directions. We see, the left is filing lawsuits against school districts that they don't like. The right is filing school districts against higher ed and UW for the situations, the policies that they don't like. This is all coming to a head. I think really what this is signaling is that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have to step in, take on one of these cases, and kind of lay down what the directive is going to be, because we have a lot of conflicting cases going on right now.
Yeah, all over the place, and yet it is students that are paying the price for this. We are seeing that female students who don't want males coming in and undressing in front of them or seeing them undressed, using restrooms, locker room, showers, and yet it's often the female students who are voicing concern about this that they're told, well, you wait and use the locker room later, or go use this private facility, rather than saying, no, that males cannot use them.
Yeah, what was concerning to us, and this is one of the bills that we were working on earlier this legislative session, is the Save Women's Sports Bill. We had a young lady who is a cross-country athlete, and she talked about how she wants to be able to only compete against women, really honoring Title IX. And what was really frustrating to us was some of the comments back from some of the Democrat legislators were, well, you just really need to work harder, or you just really need to be okay with it, even if they're going to beat you. And that's, again, the wrong mentality. And thankfully, cross country is a sport where there's not as much opportunities to be injured, but especially sports like basketball or soccer or volleyball, we need to make sure we're doing what we can to protect these women.
Yeah, indeed. And we just saw a case overturned where a male weightlifter disguising or declaring that they were female just had title removed from them because of it just so outlandish. I mean, certainly the male anatomy, you've got a larger muscle mass, you've got a larger lung capacity, the bone structure is different, and it is it's an unfair advantage over women.
Yeah, and Jim, I think just to remind the audience back home, it's that this is happening in Wisconsin. Sometimes it's easy to say, oh, well, this is happening in California, this is happening in Seattle, this is happening somewhere else, it's not happening here. But it happened in Sun Prairie High School. there was a male who was in a female bathroom and made the girls very uncomfortable. The details are very disturbing in what happened. And so these situations are not, they're not far away. They're in our backyard. So it pays to be vigilant in these situations and know what your rights are, what your kids' rights are, because these policies may go your way, they may not, but you should be really aware of how you're being treated. I think I just saw recently online that Milwaukee public schools has a travel policy that if you feel like you are, if you're a boy and you feel like you're a girl, you can sleep with a girl in their room, and as they go on, overnight stays in a hotel, if they're going on a field trip. And so that's things that the parents should know and be aware of when they're sending your kids out on overnight field trips and things like those.
Friends, you're watching inFocus here on TV 30, and one of the issues that is hitting many across the state, and it affects certainly our way of life, is the increase in tax that is taking place, specifically on the wheel tax. And we are seeing this something that's taken up all across this state. Eau Claire just raised their wheel tax from $24 to $50 for that municipality. Oshkosh, Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, Wauwatosa all just increased their wheel taxes, and the city of Milwaukee just did that as well, from $30 up to $41. That's for city, and then the county has another $30 on top of that, $71 extra per vehicle, and that's in addition to the state's $85 cost of vehicle registration. And overall, it's reported, has this article here from the Center Square, wheel taxes will cost Wisconsin taxpayers $70 million this year. We understand Senator Hutton has introduced legislation that would require local officials to have to go to voters to approve this. Will we see any movement on this? Is this something that the governor would put his veto stamp on?
Jim, it's hard to predict the future, but my guess is that the governor is supportive of the local municipalities being able to raise taxes without voter input. Just kind of the way some of these ruled on some of these things before. I think there's probably a veto coming on that right now. But I appreciate Senator Hutton bringing this forward to bring the conversation to light. I saw in the article there that back in 2010, only 4 municipalities had a wheel tax. Now, 2 decades later, there's over half of all municipalities in Wisconsin have a wheel tax. So it went from something that's not being utilized and was very rare to now something that's very common, and as you've pointed out, are being increased yearly. And so having more input from locals on that might be a good thing. Yeah,
the input would be good, and certainly we're seeing, again, the city of Milwaukee was hit with several other fees, an increase in the streetlight fees. Yes, you pay a separate fee on your water bill for streetlights, and that fee has just increased. The solid waste disposal has increased on there as well. A snowplow fee is on the water bill as well, and that has just increased, just approved in the latest budget in the municipal, the city of Milwaukee municipality. And other municipalities are going to this aspect of not raising taxes. We're just going to raise your fees, but those things are not deductible on your property tax.
Yeah, and the other thing I just thought of, because some of the listeners may be wondering of like, oh, that's a lot of taxes, and it still doesn't include all the other taxes that go into vehicles. You still have your gas tax, you still have taxes when you purchase those vehicles. There's so many things where the government is continually to tax families, continually on issue after issue after issue. And again, where our organization would come is we would say we need to do what we can to promote the family, to really make sure that families have the income that they need to provide for themselves, to boost the economy, but also to support local churches and ministries.
We'll be looking at some pieces of legislation in just a moment, but Daniel, give us an update on age verification on that legislation we've talked about before.
Yeah, so we have some really exciting news with age verification. It sounds like there's a lot of movement forward, and Sam, I'm sure we'll be able to share other things, but the first big piece is earlier this year, the Assembly passed the age verification bill, and so some might be wondering, what does age verification mean? And age verification means just like someone, if they were to go to Quick Trip to purchase alcohol, what this bill would require, it would require that pornographic websites have age verification to make sure that people are of age to view their websites. And we think this could be a great bill to really help protect families, protect children. We continue to see as technology is getting more and more involved in our daily lives, that kids are being exposed to pornography at younger and younger ages. And when they get exposed at younger ages, it causes much more long-term issues for these young people. So back to where we are legislatively. Right now it has passed out of Senate committee. And so we are pretty hopeful that we'll be able to get a vote in January or February in the Senate. And then we're hopeful that Governor Evers could potentially sign this bill as well.
Willie Sam. I know you can't predict the future, but
we're thinking there might be a good shot. We've
like
seen
good common sense.
Yeah, it's common sense. It has, when we've seen polling data on this, it has 70 to 80% public support. So if he's going to veto this, it's going to be for purely petty and partisan reasons, in my opinion. But we're hopeful because I think the governor's office can recognize the impact that it does have on kids and has on families. And as other Democrat governors have already signed this, I know Katie Hobbs in Arizona signed this into law earlier this year, and a few other states with Democrat governors have signaled the same thing, that they're open to signing this into law. So I would ask that if you are passionate about this, if you're passionate about protecting our kids and protecting them from the harms that pornography does to them, please reach out to the governor. He needs to hear from people about why this is important. He'll be hearing from us. He'll be hearing from folks that we are hoping to encourage to reach out on this. But if you are passionate about it, please reach out to the governor on this.
By the way, the governor's number is 608-256-1212. That's 608-256-1212, and let your voice be heard. There's been an update also. We brought up this legislation before, Senate Bill 553 and Assembly Bill 546, dealing with the defining of abortion. This actually has passed through the Senate, correct?
Yep, so it passed through the Senate right before Thanksgiving. This is another one of those bills that we think is super helpful, super important to make sure that people are aware of. What is the law right now in Wisconsin on abortion? So for starters, right now, abortion unfortunately is legal through the first 5 months of pregnancy. And what this bill does is it provides needed clarity to what we've seen through many of the lies that the abortion industry has shown. One of the problems we saw after Dobbs overturned Roe versus Wade is we heard these lies that women could no longer get ectopic pregnancy care or miscarriage care. It was never truthful. The law always allowed for those because those are not abortion. Abortion is the intentional killing of an unborn child, where a miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy, it's a terrible, unfortunate, but it's unintentional death of this child. And so what this bill does is it makes it crystal clear, so there's no questions whatsoever, that doctors know that they can support, that they can provide miscarriage care as well as ectopic pregnancy care. And what was really, I think, unfortunate for myself is my wife did have an ectopic pregnancy when we did have pre-Roe protections for the unborn. And thankfully, our doctor knew what the law was and said, no, I can help you. And she gave us the medical attention that my wife needed during that time. But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case for every family. Some doctors have been swindled, they have been lied to, and have fallen for these lies. And unfortunately, what we saw was there was an opportunity to right the wrongs. And in the state Senate, we saw every Republican voted for this bill, and every Democrat voted against this bill. And Governor Evers has come out and said he would veto this bill if it gets to his desk.
Why, Sam?
Well, that's a very good question, Jim, and it's actually revealed in an op-ed that a OBGYN doctor wrote recently. She works for UW, I think UW-Madison Health, and so she wrote, well, this is going to harm women. This bill is going to harm women, and it's going to increase maternal deaths. And so I looked at the commentary that she wrote on this. It's like, well, what's your reasoning behind it? And it was primarily fear-mongering and insinuation. There was no analysis of the bill. There was no direct quotes from the bill. In fact, there was no rebuttal of the medical terminology within the bill. Not once did this doctor ever mention or critique the definitions that were used in the bill or the language that was used. It was just, well, if this happens, if this bill passes, women could die. And there was no actual evidence presented. And what we've seen often is these abortion advocates, and this pro-abortion doctor, she's associated with an organization called Physicians for Reproductive Health, which has a nice kind of sounding name, but in reality, it's a rabid pro-abortion advocacy organization. Their main mission is to enable doctors to take their practice and use that as an advocacy platform to make sure that there are no abortion restrictions. So they take these credentials, well, I'm a doctor, I'm an OBGYN, you should listen to me. But in reality, they're not leading with medicine, they're leading with ideology. And so that's something that we saw as the reasoning behind that is they're gonna hide behind the veil of these fear-mongering tactics without ever presenting actual evidence. And to Daniel's point, this is what they're taking away from. They want that confusion, they want that conflation between pregnancy loss an abortion, because then they can use those in ads and they can attack candidates that they don't like who are pro-life, because they will conflate miscarriages with abortions, which we know are completely separate issues, but they want to make them seem the same.
Yeah.
So people are fear.
So this bill, Senate Bill 553, has passed the Wisconsin State Senate at this point. It will now go to the Wisconsin Assembly, and my hunch is they don't have any floor periods until January. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we need a hearing yet in the Assembly. So at the Assembly Committee on Health, we are pushing the chairperson on the Assembly Committee on Health for a hearing. Okay,
and friends, there is a hotline that you can use, the legislative hotline, 1-800-362-9472. That's 800-362-9472 to get word to your representatives on that. There is something else that's going on in the legislature, and this is an article from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. The headline, GOP bill targets abortion pills as issue of water quality. And it mentions that Wisconsin doctors who prescribe abortion pills would be required to send women home with a catch kit, medical waste bag, and instructions for the return under legislation proposed by 3 Republican lawmakers. Abortion, a water quality issue, as nearly 2/3 of all abortions are conducted via medication. What's happening right now is so much of not only the pills themselves, but even that unborn child just being flushed down the toilet, and that's getting into our water system. Hence legislation to put a stop to this.
Yeah, Jim, and I would say I really appreciate the hearts of the legislators who authored that bill, but I would say there's one crux to the issue is it's making water quality the focus of the issue, and something that we're really cognizant of and we purpose about is that when we're moving forward as pro-life legislation, we want to be focusing on the harm done specifically to the baby.
Right.
Because ultimately, while water quality is an important issue, the harm done to the child is so much more important, and it's so much more, and as well to the women. So when you talk about these medication abortions, a recent study came out that said, FDA has approved these types of medication abortions that are taken orally, and so what they said is these are practically safe. They're like Tylenol. Well, when this follow-up study was done, they found that it was almost 11 times chance that a woman who took a medication abortion would end up in the hospital with sepsis or excessive bleeding or some other emergency situation where they needed extreme care. And so what we're seeing is that these medication abortions are not safe. They're actually extremely dangerous for women's health and obviously kill the baby in the process.
Yeah. Well, there was good news, I believe it's out of the state of New York, in that the pro-abortion groups were seeking to shut down pregnancy care centers for the promotion of the abortion pill reversal, and court ruled in favor of the abortion clinics. In favor of the pro-life clinics that enable them to continue to promote the abortion pill reversal, which has saved many lives.
Oh, and even here in Wisconsin, with our work, Wisconsin Family Council with Pro-Life Wisconsin, we run an organization called Choose Life Wisconsin. They have the license plates you might have seen on the road. And we get to visit all these pregnancy resource centers, and we give money from those grants to these centers. And I hear stories from all these centers around the state of women that they have given these abortion pill reversals to, that now love their children, that have their children that have been born alive as a result.
Yeah, amen to that. We're going to look at just a few bills that have been introduced. Some of these are rather bizarre. We'll look at some of them here tonight, but let's talk about these bills, Assembly Bill number 621 and Senate Bill number 602. This was just being drafted. I know the Assembly bill just released when we were on our program last time, but this would really ban the virtual school from participating in the school choice program.
Yeah, there's so many issues with this bill, but really what this bill is, it's an attack on school choice itself. Again, we see from many liberal lawmakers that are very pro-public school, very pro-union, what they want to do is they want to do whatever they can to attack school choice. They want to do whatever they can to attack options for families. And that's exactly what this bill does. Many families throughout our state use the voucher program through virtual education. And again, this is an attack on that. What I thought was interesting is this bill doesn't attack public school options that provide virtual education. So they're okay with tax money going there, but not towards choice program schools. Another one of the issues that I saw in the bill as I talked through different people involved in the movement was we saw, again, this would not even allow for schools to be able to provide virtual education. Let's say there's a snow day. The school said we want to provide opportunities for our kids to get education for a snow day. Or even, here's an idea, what about if COVID comes back and if a school has a majority of their students with COVID, they would not be able to offer virtual education if this bill were to be passed. Thankfully, this bill has no chance of getting past this legislative session. However, what we should be really concerned about is this is sending a message, a shot across the bow, that if Democrats control the legislature and the governor's mansion in 2027, I can almost guarantee this will be one of the bills that will be heavily pushed.
Sam, this has been a real targeting, really, of religious school choice, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I'll say this is just one in a long list of bills that has targeted school choice in general. I think there's at least about a dozen Democrat-authored bills that all target school choice in one shape or fashion or another, and to either completely eliminate the program or to make it as hard as possible to participate in it. And so, yeah, this would affect religious schools specifically because many of our choice schools have a religious element to them. But ultimately, they're just trying to take away choice from the kids. And I think the biggest thing is you shouldn't be locked into the school that you go to based solely on where you were born or where you live. Being locked into a school just because of your zip code really, it doesn't make sense, especially in this modern age. Providing a good education, whatever the manner that is, whether that's public, charter, choice, or virtual option, that's the decision of a parent to make, not necessarily the government.
This next one looks really bizarre to me, and that is Assembly Bill 633 and Senate Bill 613. This is that relates to the rights of Devil's Lake State Park and providing a penalty. So it's talking about Devil's Lake State Park having rights. And I'm going to couple that with another pair of resolutions here, and that is coming to us from the Assembly Joint Resolution number 114 and Senate Joint Resolution 107. And this is about the inherent rights of nature and Wisconsin's commitment to environmental stewardship. And it talks about how the natural waterways and so forth, that they give them human rights as inanimate objects.
Jim, you're right when I don't know quite to say, because I think we touched on this actually on the reverse, because there was a bill I think one or two times ago in the program that would prevent government entities from giving rights to bodies of water or to trees or to any inanimate object. But I love Devil's Lake. I'm personally, my wife and I try to go over there once a year at least to go hike and enjoy the beauty that in God's creation there. But it doesn't need the rights that a human has. It doesn't have a soul, and it doesn't have the unique capabilities that a human does. And so I think you see when we kicked off this program, the moral drift of both this state and this country. You see things like this becoming more and more prevalent. And once again, you saw one side of the political aisle introduce a bill to say, no, we shouldn't do this. And now we've seen the other side of the aisle put out a bill that says, yeah, well, let's protect nature. Let's protect, not just protect nature, but give nature enable human rights. And so when they tell you who they are, believe them. And so this is one of the signals, like, if the people who are putting these kinds of bills out are in control, that's the things that they're going to try to promote.
I'd like to read a sentence from here as well. Resolved by the Assembly, the Senate concurring, that the Wisconsin State Legislature recognizes that nature possesses inherent rights, including the right to exist, flourish, regenerate, and be restored. That's just one of the many tenets here.
Well, and what I find is really interesting here is, so they believe that there is these inherent rights for nature, but at the same time, they do not believe in the same inherent rights for human beings that are in the womb.
Right.
And so I'm really glad this last week with the recent news of the Trump administration coming out and saying that, no, the unborn do have human rights, that abortion is a human rights issue. But again, we see this total condescendence of one side saying, like, no, everything except for what actually should matter, human life, an individual human being has rights, where others are saying, no, let's go back to the biblical foundings, let's go back to the moral foundings, that all humans have inherent worth, and they should be protected by the law.
Now, friends, as we approach elections next November, we're going to be electing a state assembly, state senate. Will they be flipping over to Democratic control? Are they going to stay Republican controlled? What about the governor for the state of Wisconsin? As Jelaine Appling often said, elections have consequences. So what we're seeing here is the consequences if that changeover takes place as to some of the legislation that's going to be introduced and carried forth. Let's take a quick look here at Assembly Bill 640, Senate Bill 627. This sets a maximum age for serving as a Supreme Court justice or a judge of court of record. Sam.
Yeah, so Jim, it's actually kind of funny, you know, all things that are old are new again. So actually, Wisconsin used to have an age limit for Supreme Court justices. I think back in 1977, the state of Wisconsin, through a constitutional amendment, changed that. They said, nope, no more age limits on Supreme Court justices. But now we have something they coming back and saying, nope, we should have age limits. Mm-hmm. So once again, what is old is new again. We'll see if this gets traction in the legislature. I'm not sure where it is right now, but we'll see if that has some buy-in from the public.
Sure. Let's also get this in, and then we'll be opening some phone lines here. This is Assembly Bill 677 and Senate Bill 671, and this would create a crime for grooming a child for sexual activity. Sadly, we're hearing this all so often here across the state and around the country.
Yeah, and I'm really thankful that the legislators that introduced this bill, this comes after DPI. There was a huge scandal that came out that DPI has all these teachers in our public schools that are grooming students that are being accused of it, they're being investigated. And then unfortunately what's happened in some cases where the DPI said is, well, if you just resign from your job, we will stop the investigation. And it was just super scary to see all these different stories. And thankfully the legislature came back and said, no, we want to make sure that kids are protected, that we can ensure that if a teacher were to groom a student, because right now there is no law in Wisconsin that prevents grooming or would criminalize grooming for teachers towards students. This would be able to protect many kids. And what's really scary is Governor Evers was on a recent TV show in the Milwaukee area where he was asked about this exact bill, and his response was he would plan to probably veto it if it gets to his desk. And it's just amazing that the education governor would oppose something as simple as saying, no, we're going to put teeth in our laws to protect children.
Daniel, didn't you know this is the year of the kid? I mean, that's what he announced, but this goes totally, so opposed to his protection of kids.
Yeah, and his argument is, he said, well, what if a kid's having a bad day? You could give that kid a hug. And again, no one is arguing that that should be illegal. The bill itself is very clear, crystal clear. This is specifically towards sexual grooming of a student.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely insane to think, why would we not want this as a law in our state?
Friends, these are some of the issues, and there are more, but let's open our phone lines tonight. If you have a question on any of these pieces of legislation we've talked about or any of the public policy topics, our phone lines are open here at 414-935-3030. What's your thoughts on this? What do you think about giving inherent rights here to Devil's Lake State Park and to state land and so forth across our state? And not only that, but that resolution also encourages local municipalities to do the same things for the parks and riverways and so forth that are in their communities. We'd like to know how you feel not only on that, but also about the redraw of congressional maps. The deck is stacked against conservative values in this. Very liberal appointees are going to form these committees here to give consideration of these matters. Our phone number tonight, 414-935-3030. 414-935-3030 or 800-733-8830. We encourage you to get on board right away with your question, your comment. Also, our text line this evening is 414-459-9638. Just give us your first name, the city that you're texting from, your brief question or comment, and we'll try and include that in on our program here tonight as well. So often we get near the end of the program, and the calls and texts start coming at that point, which makes it too late for us to be able to deal with them. So right now we do encourage you to connect connect with us here. Several issues here that we've talked about this evening, even some of the taxations, the proclamation for Transgender Day of Remembrance. We talked also about the redistricting aspect taking place here. We have the whole matter of the wheel tax. Do you believe that the citizens of a community should be able to vote on that prior to a wheel tax being instituted in that state? We have some other issues going on as it pertains to the school choice matter and also the defining of abortion in our state. These are just some of the many issues we've talked about tonight. 414-935-3030 is the number, 800-733-8830. And then also the text line is 414-459-9638. We try to have a legislative update every month here on inFocus to keep you abreast some of the matters that are going on. And friends, by watching the program, you're staying well informed of so many issues that are taking place. Many hundreds of bills have been introduced this legislative session. Some of those are picked out here tonight that will certainly impact you in one way or another, and we appreciate your tuning in for this. As we wait for listeners and viewers here tonight to call or text, we're going to mention another set of bills that has been introduced here. Since our last program, this was November 14th and 19th, Senate Bill 634 and Assembly Bill number 656. That is the age for marriage and eliminating spousal exemptions for certain sex crimes against children. What's happening with this?
Yeah, so Jim, my understanding of the bill is essentially right now in Wisconsin, someone who is 16, 17, or 18 can get married to someone who is 16 or 17 as well if they have sign off from both sets of parents. Mm-hmm. So what this bill would do is it was outlaw that, so you would only be married if you're over the age of 18. And so that's a bill being authored by Democrats being pushed forward, which I honestly think is a bit ironic. When you think about what they're pushing forwards in other realms, many of the hearings that I've sat in regarding to the transgender issue has been in relation to minors. And so they often push very hard on that children should be able to decide whether or not what gender they are, and that they should be able to decide whether they should take life-altering, permanent drugs and surgeries. Mm-hmm. And so the irony is rich where they say, well, at age 16, you are not capable of deciding who to marry, but you are capable of deciding that you should cut off your reproductive systems and other parts of your body and permanently alter your ability to have children. Mm-hmm. And things like that. And so there's this weird juxtaposition of this that they say, I mean, there's this hypocrisy from my perspective of, well, you shouldn't get married at 16, but you can do all these things to your body that are, could be even more permanent than getting married at 16.
Yeah. Well, and another issue too we look at is the issue of abortion. Right now we see many of these same Democrats are saying, no, we should not have any sort of parental even consent, any parental notifications of abortion situations. And again, it's just this other attack that we've seen towards the family, especially towards marriage in our state.
Friends, we'd like to hear from you tonight. Your thoughts, your questions, your comments on any of these pieces of legislation. 414-935-3030. Toll free at 800-733-8830. And again, the text line, just give us your first name, the city you're texting from, and you can send that text to 414-459-9638. These are issues that your legislators are voting on and considering and holding hearings on and considering. And it's vitally important for you to be informed, because how will they know how to vote unless you know what it is and you can reach out and communicate with them as well. I want to bring up one final bill that we have here before us tonight as well. And this is Assembly Bill number 665, just introduced on November the 19th. And this is something that would bring the state of Wisconsin in harmony with the federal statutes as it relates to subtracting charitable contributions by non-itemizers up to $1,000 for an individual, $2,000 for a married couple.
Yeah, Jim, this is actually something I'm really proud to talk about, is because we helped kind of plant this idea with a few folks in the legislature. There was a really excellent report by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty that pointed out that right now, with the federal changes to the standard deduction, what's happening is when you give to your church or nonprofit, often you could itemize and take a deduction for that on your taxes. Mm-hmm. But with the standard deduction getting bigger and bigger, there's less and less incentive to itemize. Therefore, there's less and less incentive for people to take advantage of that tax benefit to donate to churches or to nonprofits. And so we've seen a dip in actually contributions to nonprofits and churches specifically, and because the tax benefit isn't there. And so what we had suggested, along with Wisconsin for Law and Liberty, is that if you created a new universal charitable deduction on top of the standard deduction, you might be able to incentivize more people to give to these organizations that, like ours, that support the family. And that was our argument: is if you want to support the family, if you want to have strong families in the state of Wisconsin, the best way you can do that is to incentivize people to support their local churches, because local churches are the best place for families to get plugged in and for them to grow and to be strong pillars of our community. And so we look forward to seeing where that bill heads in the future. Hopefully we'll get some traction on that and some good conversation both in the Assembly and Senate, because I think this is something that could have a positive impact on both the financial and spiritual health of our state.
It really can. Assembly Bill 665, and as you, Daniel, as Sam said here, people have been disincentivized from giving to nonprofit organizations, and that should not be our motivation, a tax deduction, but yet it is something that has encouraged people. I do want to give this money away and not be taxed on it.
Yeah, and what's really concerning, and this is just broader ministries, but I've heard and seen some studies that show, and this is just a generic church study, but about 20% of people that show up to church will not give $1 to their church throughout the year. And about 50% of people that show up to church will give anywhere between $0 to $499. And then 20% of churches, people are giving $500 or more. So I'm really encouraged with this bill. I hope that it will encourage more people to give, but to give generously, to give charitably, but also we believe this is important because we're not opposed to government trying to find solutions to different issues, but we know that churches and ministries and nonprofits are a much better bang for their buck than the government will ever be in these different issues. And we believe this specifically, if we're able to better support nonprofits, support ministries, support churches, this will have much better economic outcomes for the state of Wisconsin in the long run.
And that's something we do very often, Jim, is we try to identify the situations where government has gotten in the way of a positive thing. There's so many different examples in our tax code or even our welfare system where the government has over time built in disincentives to marriage or to family or to raising kids. And so we try to identify those kinds of policies and say, hey, why don't we remove this barrier to creating marriages? Why don't we remove this barrier to having more kids and families? And so we're encouraged to see that some legislators are taking on to that initiative and looking at ways that we can better support the family by getting government out of the way, not more involved in the family.
We're just about ready to close off the year 2025, and as you look back at the legislature, you look forward to this 2026 year, there are some big challenges that are before the state and some big challenges before a family that's concerned about traditional values. Daniel, we'll have you comment first and then Sam.
Yeah, well, I would say one of the things that we saw good movement on this year and we'll need to continue to see movement as we go into 2026 is a constitutional amendment that will protect churches. In 2020, we saw throughout the state of Wisconsin, Governor Evers, by his own decree through an administrative rule, said, well, churches, you need to be shut down. And he told churches how they are to operate. And we believe that is not the role of government. That is the role of the church and local churches to say how they'll operate and whether or not they'll be open or closed. Now, if a church says because of a pandemic or because of a health crisis, we're going to close our doors, that is a decision that should be up to that church. But we believe it should not be up to government. Thankfully, this passed the legislature in our last legislative session. So the next step in the process is for it to pass in this legislative session. If that happens, we think there's a really good chance we'll likely see it either the April or the November 2026 ballot, an opportunity for Christians around Wisconsin to be able to vote and get those in their church able to vote to ensure that their churches can never, ever be shut down again.
Sam.
Yeah, and Jim, looking forward, 2026 is going to be a fast-paced year. It's obviously an election year, so you're going to see the legislature, they're going to be in session for January and February, maybe a little bit of March, and then they're going to adjourn, and they will go back home, and they're going to start campaigning. They're going to be knocking, hopefully, on your door, asking for your thoughts and asking for your vote. So that's something for you to be paying attention to. I think really what we've seen reflecting on 2025 and looking into 2026 is we've seen a legislature that is seeking for meaning. And that's something that I've been reflecting on this at the end of this year is there wasn't a very common or even cohesive theme that the legislature was working on. It was a lot of scatterbrain, some good things over here, some maybe not so good things over here from our perspective, but it was kind of all over the place. And so what we've seen is this need for strong direction for both our legislature and for our political leaders. And so I think that's something to pray for going into 2026 is that there will be people that will influence these legislators, maybe yourself when you reach out to them, to influence them to stand for truth, to speak to policies that are supporting of the family, that will defend liberty and defend life. And so I encourage you to ponder on that going into 2026.
And let me just say this, that whole aspect of direction is so important, because right now the policy seems to be, if you're for it, I'm against it, no matter what it is. And we have that division that is taking place, and really to chart it out, where do we want to go as a state? What is best for the people rather than what is best politically speaking? There's a lot of division taking place, Daniel.
Yeah, there definitely has been a lot of division. There's definitely some areas where we've seen bipartisanship, and I'd say one of those too is we talked about age verification earlier, but what's been really encouraging for Sam and I, where we think we do have a good shot for the governor to sign that bill, is we had more than half of the Democrats in the state assembly vote for that bill. And so where Sam said earlier to please contact your state senator on that issue, we highly encourage it, because we will need each and every vote in the state Senate as well as for the governor to be able to sign on to that bill, because we believe that will transform Wisconsin, it will transform marriages for generations to come.
Friends, let me remind you of the legislative hotline number, which is 1-800-362-9472. That's 800-362-9472. That's, if you don't have your direct number to your legislator, you call that number, they'll give you that point of contact so you can convey these important matters. Let me also just mention that staying in touch with Wisconsin Family Council. Daniel, you put out a regular email release when things are happening. You keep people informed. You put information out in church bulletins, inserts as well. And with this election year coming up, and Sam, I know you'll be very engaged with matters, they can be in contact with you at Wisconsin Family Council. Yeah, and people can reach out to us. Our phone number is 888-378-7395, and our website is WIFamilyCouncil.org. That's WIFamilyCouncil.org. We'd be more than happy to help you in any way that you could possibly need help. And then you can also email us at info@WIFamilyCouncil.org. Okay, at critical times in which we live, and friends, we just encourage you to stay plugged in to what is taking place. And we know that the matter of family values have often been under attack, and your legislators are going to impact. Their votes are going to impact you one way or another. One quick word, we're just down to a minute here. We've got the Christmas time coming up. State Capitol is usually a battleground as well. From the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Wisconsin Family Council, you'll have a display up there this year. Yeah, we'll have a display of the nativity scene. And what's really interesting with that, and again, we talk about these attacks from the left. So, we've seen Governor Evers in the past not call the Christmas tree. He's called it a holiday tree. Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting this year? He's just called it the tree, not even the holiday tree. And so we want to provide an opportunity for the gospel to be shared through the nativity story, through the Christmas story that we've shared. And we've done this for decades as our organization. And Freedom from Religion does it. It was founded in Madison. Its headquarters are in Madison. So each and every year they try to combat our message with their message of atheism, their message of naturalism. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us here tonight. We're out of time. Yeah, thank you. Friends, we thank you for joining us here tonight on TV 30's inFocus. Thanks for watching.